Today's episode is presented by Amazon. Across Europe, businesses are growing with the AWS cloud to build innovative, scalable products. From Europe's largest enterprises and government agencies to the continent's fastest-growing startups, learn more about how AWS Cloud is helping businesses across Europe grow at aws.eu.
It's Wednesday, February 11, and this is the Brussels Playbook podcast. It's your guide to what's driving EU politics. The vibe today is safe as the EU's defence ministers meet in Brussels. Also on the table, some EU leaders are joining a European industry summit in Antwerp, and we're looking for political miracles in Brussels. I'm Zoya Sheftalovich, Politico's chief EU correspondent, and with me in the studio today is our senior EU politics editor, Wishart.
Hello Zoya, morning everyone. They let us back for a second day, so I think that's an achievement in itself.
An achievement or a miracle, some might say. All right, let's get to it.
So our first story today, EU defence ministers coming to Brussels, meeting here for the Foreign Affairs Council hosted by Kaja Kallas, the High Representative. But I find something that's interesting, Zoya, is that the Ukrainian defence minister is also here, isn't he? And I think that's kind of like a very good example just of what we were talking about yesterday, about Ukraine slowly being brought into the EU fold.
That's right. Mykhailo Fedorov is in town. It's a pretty interesting occasion for him. He's only really been appointed last month. Before that, he was the digital transformation minister of Ukraine. And he has a reputation as like something of a wonderkind. He was able to transform a lot of Ukraine's tech policy. He really made a big splash. He looked at things like disinformation, and there was a lot of stuff that he did that was quite new and that the EU looked at and thought, oh, wow, that's really interesting what they're doing. So now there's a bit of a hope that he might bring that approach to the defense role that he's got now. So I think there's a lot of curiosity. I've spoken with my sources who are briefing ministers ahead of this meeting, and they're all very interested to hear what he has to say.
And one of the discussions he's going to be involved in is about this 90 billion euro loan the EU is sending to Ukraine. And basically what they've got to decide is how this money can be spent and what it's going to be used for. You know, they're talking about air defense, drone defense. Some countries want to send Patriot missiles to Ukraine. That's all part of this discussion, isn't it?
It is. And what's really important for Ukraine here is to really put forward the message that Kyiv would like to be able to make its own decisions when it comes to choosing what it spends that money on. Because there is a camp in the EU, and this is part of the debate we've been covering here at Politico, a camp led by the French that says the Ukrainians should be buying European weaponry.
This is killing two birds with one stone, basically, isn't it?
Exactly. Because if you've got all of this money going into the defense industry, well, the French and others might like that money to go towards boosting their homegrown companies. But the flip side of that, which other countries are actually putting forward, is the idea that, like, listen, the only people who know what Ukraine needs are Ukrainians. They're the ones who are best positioned to decide whether they want to spend this money on EU weaponry or if they want to go somewhere else, like, for instance, the US or the UK, and buy stuff that they need right now, because we know it's been a brutal winter for Ukraine. Their energy infrastructure has been attacked. People have been freezing cold. So there is a real sense from the Ukrainians of urgency, and they want to be able to make their own decisions. And that's actually why it's so important for Ukraine to be in these sorts of meetings and represented.
So that's that point of the discussion. And then the more formal item on the agenda is signing off on the national plans for 8 countries to get some money as part of the big defence programme called SAFE. That's Security Action for Europe. 8 countries today: Estonia, Greece, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Slovakia, Finland and Poland. Poland getting the bulk of the money.
Yeah, 44 billion out of 150.
I find the most interesting thing about this is just the sheer speed that this is happening. You know, this programme was announced less than a year ago by the European Commission. The programme's due to be signed off today, and they're supposed to get this money by next month. That's really quick for the EU, isn't it?
It's astonishingly quick. And actually, Ian, one of my sources was telling me that actually the reason why they're signing off on 8 plans today and some of them are being punted to next week is actually because it happened so fast they haven't had enough time to translate everything.
Well, that's such an EU problem, isn't it?
24 languages, 24 problems, Ian.
Yeah. So then they go into a dinner today And that's maybe when the juicy stuff happens.
That's right. So we've been told it's in a 1+1 format, which is it's the minister and an aide and no phones.
So not very easy for journalists to find out what's going on. And that's the point, I suppose.
That's exactly the point. And that's why we reckon, the juicy conversation about Donald Trump and transatlantic relations might happen at that dinner. The other thing they may discuss is the Munich Security Conference, which is coming up soon. So it's towards the back end of the week. On Friday, it kicks off. And of course, last year, that was attended by US Vice President J.D. Vance, who caused quite the stir. This year, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio is representing the Trump administration. So I'm sure that'll come up as well. If not at the dinner, then perhaps in the line for the cubicles after. A star-studded list of EU leaders are going to be attending the third European Industry Summit in Antwerp today, Ian. It's a pretty big deal this year because it's quite unusual. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is going to be there. Ursula von der Leyen is going to be there. They're going to give addresses. Why are these bigwigs coming?
Well, it's very much seen as the hors d'oeuvre, isn't it, to the European Council retreat?
The horse devours?
The hors d'oeuvre for the European Council on Thursday, which is happening in that castle that we mentioned yesterday, Oudenbiesen. I looked it up. It's actually way over in the east of the country near the Dutch border, near Maastricht. But yeah, this is the European Industry Summit hosted by the Belgian Prime Minister Bart de Wever. And I think what's interesting is the way that this has suddenly become a mainstream topic for the EU. We've seen how less than 2 or 3 years ago, this was very much a thing that was being pushed by business leaders and various different industrial sectors. And now I think it's a sign of the way that the EU has changed, that prominent leaders are here talking about industrial policy.
And it is sort of an interesting counterbalance. You've got Brussels, where EU regulation is made, and now you've got Antwerp, where industry calls for EU regulation to be unmade. So it's kind of a yin and yang, like you and me, Ian.
I don't know which is which, though. That's the thing. It was in 2024, I think, that this meeting produced the Antwerp Declaration, which called for a European industrial deal. And I think that was seen as the business and industry trying to sort of counterbalance the Green Deal, which they thought was causing too much red tape. And it was about calling for more deregulation in order to boost the economy.
Yeah, and that's how we got the Clean Industrial Deal, rolls off the tongue, not to mention the simplification drive. So yeah, look, I think an industry summit isn't normally something you or I would cover. We would normally stick to political stuff, but this one really rises to that political level because it's influential. There is a pretty good opportunity for politicians to meet the industries and to hear from them, to hear what's bothering them. So
one of the ones I singled out actually was car makers. The European Automobile Manufacturers Association are using this meeting to push the EU to boost car production. The amount of cars that are being produced in Europe has gone down quite dramatically, and they want to use this meeting to make that case. I think that's just a very small example of how Europe can be less reliant on the rest of the world.
It might be small, but it's important, and I think it gives us a bit of an indication as to why Friedrich Merz is going to be there, because obviously the car industry is really an existential one for Germany. And meanwhile, China is absolutely streets ahead of the rest of the world when it comes to EVs. They've had all sorts of government programs that have boosted that industry. And there is huge concern in Europe, and particularly in Germany, that we're looking around and seeing these other countries are nipping at our heels and in some cases are overtaking us. And so that's really the point that's going to be made by some of these industry leaders today. And I think there is a pretty significant chance that some of those conversations are going to be reflected tomorrow when the EU leaders meet for their informal summit.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's all very clearly, tightly choreographed. You've got the industry discussions today, and obviously leaders have that fresh in their minds when they speak to their counterparts tomorrow. And then go to Munich for the rest of the week. This is all part of, I think, of this machinery of the EU really kicking in now. But let's also look at the other side of the argument, because some NGOs have accused Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, of siding too closely with industry. So there's always a flip side here. I think the letter came from NGOs like Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth. Deregulation is not to everyone's taste, is it?
Yeah, that's right. These NGOs are saying saying deregulation is not an industrial strategy. That's their message. They're warning that if you roll back the Green Deal rules to revive the economy, that's going to have all sorts of problems when it comes to things like environmental protections and so forth. So I think there is a bit of concern also about the speed of the so-called omnibus packages. That's simplification for you and me, deregulation as they might call it. So yeah, these folks are saying it's too fast, there's not enough scrutiny, and let's slow it down a bit. Pump the brakes.
Well, we can all follow the developments from Antwerp on our website today. We've got a reporter going there. I don't know how early their bus is leaving, Zoya. Is it as early as yours tomorrow?
One can only hope. I'd like to have some company in my misery.
And that leads us on to our third story, because this is about Bart de Wever. He's hosting that meeting in Antwerp today, but he's also had something to say about Brussels city politics, hasn't he?
Yeah, he reckons if you give him control of Brussels, in 5 years he'll clean this place up. He reckons he'll do it cheaper than anyone else can do, which would be quite funny to put a Flemish nationalist separatist in charge of the Brussels region.
Yes, Bart de Wever said if he was given carte blanche, he would work miracles in Brussels in 5 years and with less money. That's quite Trumpian, really, isn't it?
Well, it was almost as Trumpian as the leader of the French-speaking Liberals MR, Georges-Louis Boucher, who reckons he might get a government in Brussels region by the end of this week. It's like saying that you might solve the war in Ukraine and Russia in a day. So,
yeah, which is what Trump said just before he came to office, wasn't it?
Exactly. So we've got 7 parties that kicked off talks actually yesterday in what they call a conclave in Belgian nomenclature. And basically what they're trying to do is something that hasn't been done in, guess how many days, Ian?
Well, I read a couple of weeks ago it was 600 days since Brussels had a government, so it must be just over 600, is it?
Yeah, 612.
That's nearly 2 years.
Look, I don't know that I have faith that we're going to see a Boucher breakthrough.
So what would you do if you had carte blanche to work miracles in Brussels?
I'd be more flat out than a lizard drinking, Ian.
I have no idea what that means, Zoya.
I'd be busy.
I was thinking it would be quite nice to have a pedestrianised plaza between the Berlaymont and the Justice Lipsus. I think that was a little bit more mundane as a miracle.
Well, I'd settle for cobblestones that aren't missing in the streets of Brussels. That would be quite nice. I wouldn't be rolling my ankle every 5 minutes.
Yeah, you fell over last week, didn't you?
Yeah, landed flat on my... I went...
On your what?
I'm not allowed to say that word. I was going to say I went arse over tit, but I don't think that'll make the cut. Yeah, it was not my finest moment.
As opposed to this podcast, which definitely is. Before we wrap up, shall we talk about some people who got in touch after yesterday?
Yes, look, thank you to all who've written in or sent us voice notes on our WhatsApp number, which is, by the way, in the show notes. Please do reach out. I do read them all, and for now, I'm able to respond to them all. So, get a personal message from Zoya if you send one in. So, look, we've had a few interesting things come in. We've got recommendations coming in from our listeners for pubs around Brussels. Wild Geese got a shout out. And then we've had a lovely listener called Ville who said that the James Joyce is worth checking out, but only if you can stomach being surrounded by British diplomats like yourself, Ian.
I'm not a diplomat, but what can be more attractive than lots of British people drinking lots of beer?
We've also had another listener write in and recommend the Wild Rover on Rue Joseph. And there's the Dubliner as well, although they also say that someone needs to save the karaoke pulpit from De Valera's. Do you know what that means, Ian?
I have no idea what that means.
Actually, speaking of karaoke, what's your karaoke song, Brussels? That's what I want to know. So, that's our next call out. Let us know what your perfect classic is.
And let us know who you are so we can avoid you.
How very dare you, Ian? I like to do I Will Survive. What about yours?
Total Eclipse of the Heart. Shall we stop?
Folks, that's it for today's Brussels Playbook podcast. Please subscribe to our show if you haven't already. Leave us a rating. You know what? 5 stars would be so nice. Or a review, even better. Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Zoya. And I'm not here tomorrow, but you've got Sarah speaking to you.
I do. Sarah Wheaton is going to be with me tomorrow. I'm Zoya Sheftalovich. See you then.
A message from Amazon. Across Europe, businesses are growing with the AWS cloud to build innovative, scalable products. From Europe's largest enterprises and government agencies to the fastest-growing startups, customers choose the AWS cloud to lower costs, increase security, and innovate faster. Learn more about how businesses across Europe are growing with the AWS cloud at aws.eu.